so much for the warm welcome. Thank you to all of you for being here. I see a few of my students here, so thank you so much for coming. I was worried about the turnout today. It's recess, it's bitterly cold, and I think we'd all much rather be at home with coffee, so thank you so much. The topic that I'm discussing today is based on, strangely enough, a book that Yusuf and I co-authored on tolerance in education. And so when the whole uproar happened with the posters, it coincided with the publication of our book. But the issue of tolerance, of course, is an ongoing struggle for us. And when I look at the issue of tolerance, I'm looking at it from the point of view of philosophy of education. How do we inculcate this thing called tolerance in our classroom? How do we inculcate it in our universities? And how do I inculcate it in my interactions with you? Because ultimately, it comes down to the individual. And so I'm going to do a presentation. I will take into account the controversy that I have on display there. I think that certainly in my classes that's been sitting with us. And then I would like to invite you to ask any questions at the end, and that's my favorite part of it because that allows us to really engage. And so I hope that we can do that. So just for some overview. Personally, I've always struggled with the word tolerance because I always had the sense that the word tolerance means to put up with somebody, and I think that's the kind of negative things. I've always tried to avoid the word, and I've yet to find a better word for the word tolerance. So I have my own misgivings about the word, but when I've been looking at literature, just to give you an idea of what is out there, I like the idea that, okay, so it evokes patience, that it somehow means we've got to be patient with another person, that we have to be open to somebody, and that's good. I like the Socratic one as well, that it's actually the pursuit of truth, which really appeals to me because what that says to me is that the possibility of multiple truths exists. And that there cannot be one singular truth. And so if there's not one singular truth, then there can't be one singular way of living or thinking. And then you have scholars who say, well, like Murphy, who say that actually tolerance is about ensuring that you don't infringe upon another person to assert his or her rights. So that's also interesting because now it's about self-restraint. I've got to restrain myself from imposing my own views onto another person. And Fiala, for example, talks about it being a pragmatic response. And you've got to be practical about it, that no amount of philosophical argumentation or political force, as we are well familiar with in this country, is going to ensure that we all think alike or act alike. And so we might as well accept it and recognize that it's about diversity. And people like Michael Walsers talks about that it's about peaceful coexistence. And so all of these are the ideas and theories that I try to take into account when I eventually construct my argument. But I'll probably end up leaning most towards Amy Gutman, who talks about tolerance as the practice of agreeing to disagree. Now, that's probably cliche, because I think we often use it. We say, let's agree to disagree, but then we leave with our views firmly intact. So it's a strange way of looking at it. What I like about Amy Gutman, and I'll come back to this, is that she ties the acts of tolerance to human behavior, and that it's entirely interrelational, and that ultimately acting in a tolerant manner has got to do with accepting that there's difference, but then guarding against yourself. So in other words, if I exercise tolerance in relation to you, what I'm saying is that not only am I prepared to engage with your view or your understanding of the world, but I'm also prepared to acknowledge that there's a possibility that my own understanding of the world might not be the right one. And that's a really powerful one, because what that does to me is that puts into place all sorts of uncomfortability and uncertainty and hesitancy about my beliefs, which I think is important for us to have, particularly as teachers, because if you can do that, then you can truly begin to step back and consider that just perhaps the other person has a better view. And that's something that I'll come back to. So it's about seeing the value in another's truth. It's about different considerations, different viewpoints, but ultimately, Another viewpoint which I find interesting, and this will lead me into the next part of the conversation, is that people like Alistair McIntyre actually locates tolerance with the idea of disagreement and disruption, and controversy, and conflict, and dissonance. And so he says that unless you have disagreement, disruption, conflict, and threats, there will be no need for tolerance. So tolerance is in fact reliant on difference. Because if we were all in agreement, and we all got along splendidly, and we all saw the world from the same perspective, there would be no need for me to tolerate anything else. There's only one view. So that's what Alistair McIntyre has to say. Now, the way I make sense of tolerance, and which brings me, and what will take me to my final argument, which brings me to the narcosis issue, is that I use a particular theorist, Belgian post-Marxist scholar called Chantal Mouffe. And Chantal Mouffe, for me, is really attractive because she brings into contestation the liberal view of democracy. She doesn't step out of the framework entirely. She holds onto the frameworks in terms of there's got to be respect for the other. I can only engage with you if there's regard for the other, if I'm prepared to listen to what you have to say. But what she draws upon is this idea called agonistic pluralism. And the word agonistic comes from the Greek word agon, which refers to a festival or a sports arena where there was conflict. So what she says is that we need to accept that within any sort of scenario, within any democracy, any classroom situation, there will be contestation, there will be disagreement, and it's a natural part of any democracy. And so therefore we have to allow it. We have to accept conflict, and she goes as far as saying we have to accept violence as a necessary part of democracy. Because democracy implies divergent views. And with divergent views comes conflict. So she uses this term, a political agonist, but she's very clear that even within the contestation and the disagreement and the controversy, there are the limits, and those limits are determined by how I engage with you. And that's the important point she makes. But what we need to be in mind about what Mouffe is presenting to us is this idea that democracies, the one we are in right now, is necessarily a space of antagonism, of disagreement. And this is part and parcel of it. So she criticizes the liberal understandings that would want to discount that. So she says, on the one hand, liberal democracy wants to advocate for liberal views and listening to all sorts of different viewpoints, but on the other hand, the moment they encounter something which they deem to be hateful or controversial or problematic, they want to shut it down. And she's saying, that's not democracy, that's something else. So I find her very appealing. So what she does is, she uses the term agonistic pluralism to present a new way to think about democracy. And I think it's important for us currently in the climate that we're in, because even though we keep on saying things like we are 23 years into a democracy, by now we should have sorted ourselves out, I'm not quite sure what that means in any case. It's not as if we're ever going to sort ourselves out. It's not as if there's an end point to what it means to live in a democratic society. There's never going to be a time when we are going to just get along. That's not going to happen. And I often say to my students that when we all are getting along, there's something wrong in any case. Because then possibly we're not actually expressing what we truly feel. It's a bit like a marriage. People say, no, we never argue, and I go, oh, okay, something wrong with your marriage. So it's that kind of thinking that she kind of, and then here, if I look at people like Foucault, he uses agonism in relation to a struggle with the self. It's an internal struggle that you have. And so here we have to look at ourselves and ask ourselves, when we struggle with a particular viewpoint, such as the Nazi posters, is it about the Nazi poster or about us? Who's the struggle actually with? Is it about the student who put it up, or is it about me? And so tolerance ultimately comes down to an internal struggle, a preparedness to reconsider closely held values, reconsider strongly held views, and being prepared to step out of it, even just momentarily. So, to sum up, she's very clear that in as much as conflict might be undesirable, nobody wants to go into a conflict situation, right? We need to accept that it's a necessary part of what it means to be a part of a democracy. Now, I'm going to just skip that one because I want to get to, I want to speak about why she's so intent upon pushing for conflict as being a part of a democracy. And I think this is something we need to ponder on as well. Why is she so intent upon saying that disagreement is a part of a democracy? Well, firstly, if you allow spaces for disagreement, then what you are actually saying is that you are prepared to listen to different viewpoints. And so you have to allow that. It's a necessary part of what it means to be a thinking human being. But the other reason that she pushes it for is that she says that when you allow disagreement to come forth, what you do is you allow other types of powers to come on display. And I think we in South Africa, we have no shortage of that. We really don't have to look too far. If we consider the type of rhetoric that Julius Malema embraced a few years ago, where he would kill for Zuma, and he embodied a particular kind of democracy at play, right? And he liked the rhetoric of kill so-and-so and do this, that, and the other. And now the rhetoric has shifted to something else. So when you allow, and South Africa is as problematic as we are, we do allow those kinds of voices to come through. And that says something about our constitution. But when we allow that to happen, what happens is that new types of power bases take form. And this is why she says it's so important. Now, does this mean that we allow anything? Does this mean, is Move saying that, well, if disagreement is a part of a society and controversy is a part of who we are, and it's just a part of violence and we need it to be vibrant democracy, does that mean that anything goes? Does that mean that I can say exactly what I want to you and do as I please? And she says no. And this is important. What she actually says is that conflict is inevitable in a democracy, but it must be underscored that it does not refer to all conflict. Okay? And she differentiates between having a political disagreement with somebody and having a moral disagreement with somebody. And it's the same thing that Amy Gutman argues for. And I think that's where we knock. I think that's where we lose the plot. And I think part of the reason for that is that as an emergent democracy, I don't think we have the language yet to engage on a moral level, or political level for that matter. But I think that's possibly the hook, and I'm not quite sure. One of the things that she does talk about is the issue of hate speech. Now, I know when the posters came up, and I have the PGCEs for philosophy of education, and I could feel the tension in the room, and people wanted to speak about these Nazi posters. And my response was, I really would like to invite them to come to our lecture. Will you allow me to invite them to come and talk to us? And that was the usual. I mean, there was someone who said yes, and others said, oh, are you insane? You can't do that. What are you trying to do? And so let me explain, and this is at the heart for me of the lecture. And we pick up on it in our book as well, by pure coincidence. But the issue of hate speech is indeed one form of a controversy. It is because what is one person's hate speech is another person's not. And of course, hate speech is entirely an emotional reaction. And so how do we deal with it? So if we look at the example that happened recently on our campus, we had a few students who chose to display a Nazi-inspired poster which advertised an Anglo-Afrikaans student event under the motto, Fight for Stellenbosch, in English and Afrikaans. And the institutional provided the institutional response, which in line with the policy, said we now need to suspend these students. And I have my own personal views on that. I'm not quite sure what that does when you take people out of a scenario, because the views they have will just go with them in any case. So I'm not quite sure what that does, but that's something else. So the posters were deemed breach of the university's policies on the basis of harassment and discrimination, on the basis that it created a tense university environment, on the basis that it alienated particular students. I know, again, if I draw my own class in interactions with my students, there were people from the Jewish faith who felt very, very strongly about that. And there were people from the Afrikaner group who felt this puts us all into a bad light. And so in that respect, and taking that into account, it was felt the best way to deal with these students was to ask them to remove themselves temporarily. Now, we understand hate speech to mean the deliberate intent to cause harm. And so when we deliberately say a particular word, whether it's the K word or whatever you want to call somebody, the N word, and then that is a deliberate attempt to inflict harm, and that then becomes what we call hate speech. But as you can well imagine, that hate speech idea is entirely subjective. It's an entirely subjective thing. It will not be something that you can apply across societies, because every society will be steered and influenced and shaped by its own idea of what it constitutes as hateful and not. But what distinguishes hate speech from other kinds of controversy or disagreement or dissonance is the fact that hate speech is about a moral attack rather than simply a political attack. And we see this all the time. When we can't get the point across anymore by simply arguing the point, we go for the person. Isn't that so? And we suddenly attack you at another level, and now the argument changes. Now, in as much as I have my own questions and misgivings about how we understand hate speech, I do want to go to the works of Judith Butler. Because what she does, and I like what she does, because I somehow think that part of the problem with hate speech is that we have given it too much power ourselves. When we say to people, don't use that particular word, or when we say to, how can you say that? We assign power to that. When we start speaking, the asterisks, or they beep you out on the radio, then we assign power to that, because it's now the unmentionable. And within the unmentionable bit, for me, that's where the power resides. So what Judith Butler does is she says, maybe it's not the word so much that bothers us. Maybe it's not the Nazi poster itself which bothers us. It's the unanticipation of it. It's the unexpectedness of it. So somebody says something to you, and it's in that moment that the hate happens. So you see the poster and you go, gosh, how offensive is that? But if you actually step back from it, she says, just step back from it temporarily and re-signify it. Turn it around. And instead of saying to the person, go away, your actions are reprehensible and contemptible and you cannot be a part of a society, what she says is, let me understand why you have done this. Let me understand what you hope to achieve by putting up a poster representing Nazism. What was the desire? She says when you are able to engage with the language of that person, you can begin to re-signify what the intent, or you can begin to re-signify the harm of that word. And I find that interesting because I think there's so many taboos in our society. There's so many things that we dare not speak about. But it's not as if because we don't speak about something that these things don't exist. It's not as if because you silence me, I stop having those viewpoints. In fact, when you silence me and when you sideline me, two things are happening here. Your practices are in fact undemocratic. Because we are saying on the one hand we are a liberal, tolerant society, but on the other hand we are saying we are not prepared to listen to views which are not like our own. So, and the other thing that happens when you silence somebody is you simply reinforce that idea anyway. Because if I'm not prepared to listen to you, then all I'm thinking, well, that just proves my point. You are what I think you are. You're not prepared to engage with the other. And so this is an opportunity for us to really think about that. So Butler for me, I've used because it's my own way of making sense, because I'm of the opinion that unless a particular word is deliberately meant to cause you personal harm, I question this category thing of just, I think, having a blanket application for something called hate speech. We have to start interrogating that, else we get held hostage by speech. And it doesn't allow us to connect with each other, because then we get stuck in that language. So it's about identifying the hate speech. It's about recognizing that when hate speech happens, it also has to do with the individual who's inflicting it. That this person who puts up that poster, or this person who chooses to use a particular word to describe you, there's something happening within him or her that needs to come out in any case. And so what Butler says, it's going to be in our interest democratically to engage with that need rather than to suppress it. So that's important. Now, all of that being said, we've gone through the tolerance understanding. It's being open, it's having patience, it's being prepared to engage with the other. I've taken you through Moof's idea that a society, a democratic society, a university space where not only are you different individuals sitting in this room right now, but you are literally different communities that's come together. And so together we constitute complex, highly intense communities. And so when a student comes into your class, that student comes into your class with his or her entire community. You don't get to leave that community at the door. And then similarly, when I enter a lecture theatre, I enter with my entire community, and it's hard to just leave it at the door. And I think we undermine that to a very large extent. And we don't attach enough meaning to that, and what that does to our teaching practices. Now that we've looked at the hate speech, now that we know how the posters have created certain tensions, but I would like to think created some talking points for us, which is what we should get out of these things anyway, because every moment is an educational moment anyway, that's how I see it. The question remains, are there limits to the controversies that we are prepared to tolerate? Or do we simply tolerate everything? And in the book we developed something called conditional tolerance. And what we argue for is that while we do not have to accept ideas and ideologies as espoused through the Nazi-inspired posters or other forms of hate speech, we do have to accede to the right and the legitimacy of people to hold those particular views. We have to accept that they have the right to have those particular views. And in as much as it might be abhorrent to us, these views do exist. And so we have to allow them to express that. And we have to defend their right to express those views. So you have the right to speech. You have the right to say certain things like you believe in a pure race. Say it. You allow, that's your view. No amount of me telling you to keep quiet is going to change that view. And liberal democracies have to be prepared to tolerate views that are seemingly undermining of liberal views. Right? What we need to look for is the justification. So now that I engage with you, you've made your views clear to me, and I'm using Butler, and I'm going to re-signify, and I'm going to engage with you, and I'm going to ask you to explain to me why you have these views. What we now look for is the justification. That's where the tolerance comes in. So I use the example of a teacher, for example, where you might encounter, we've had this happen in schools recently, where a teacher separated kids along racial lines. It happened at a private school under the auspices that kids learn better when they are with their own, and owns in inverted commas. And she genuinely believed this, and this is what she did until somebody made a video of it, and it became a big outcry about it. Now, I would be prepared to engage with her. I would want to understand what thinking informed her to get to a point where she believes that kids learn differently when they are with the same color. So if I don't engage with her, then I am intolerant of her. Isn't that so? But by engaging with her, I display tolerance towards her. That doesn't make her action any less intolerable. Am I making sense to you? Yeah. So in other words, what I'm trying to get through is that we can't condemn actions like the Nazi posters and say that's an intolerant display of racism, when our response in itself is one of intolerance. We have to display tolerance, allow the person to offer an explanation, and then get to an understanding. And not that it's not about, I mean, we're always on about this consensus. It's not about getting consensus. It's not about getting to agreement. It's not about getting you to see things the way I do. That's not going to happen. It's about jarring you enough that you step out of how you see things. That's what's important. And so, the issue of tolerance is about disconnecting from singular truths. It's also about connecting. If we say that we are a part of a pluralist society and a diverse society, then that means we have to recognize that there will be pluralist ideas. It's as simple as that. We have to accept that. They may not gel with all that we hold, but we have to accept that these ideas exist. In as much as individuals have the moral right to believe what they do, whether or not we have to tolerate their beliefs is indeed conditional. And that's an important discrepancy. So people have the right to believe what they do. It's up to us whether we accept it or not. And tolerance does not mean the acceptance of anything. Tolerance means I am prepared for my own sake to listen to what you have to say, because ultimately it's about me and my engagement with you. Tolerance is conditional because the moment you are alienated from a conversation, or the moment you feel coerced, then that is intolerant. Okay? So if the answer to the question is, are there conditions attached to tolerance? The quick answer would be yes. There are. Because if the result of the Nazi posters is, and it has been that, one of alienation, one of anger, one of insult and harm and moral harm, then indeed that action is one of intolerance. Okay? So on that grounds, I have to be clear that tolerance should be displayed in relation to all people, in all different views, but we have to allow the person to offer justification as to why that is the case. So conditional tolerance refers to the capacity of humans to agree, to disagree about matters that influence them. This means that the act of tolerance is limited to the recognition of people's competing conceptions of what the good life is. And there are genuinely people who genuinely believe that we would do better if we simply went back to apartheid. This is genuinely a belief. That is their conception of a good life. We have to allow that. So, this implies that not only should people treat one another as civic equals, but also that they respect each other as moral equals. People, therefore, cannot simply do what they want. So you and I might differ, and we have different beliefs, and different ways of seeing the world, and we allow for that, and we allow for that disagreement to happen. But where you and I, where there is no discrepancy between you and I, is that we are moral equals. And because we are moral equals, I should be free from harm as far as you are concerned. And you should be free of harm from me. And I think that is, for me, in as much as the posters, as the example, created a bit of havoc on campus, I think for me that was at the heart of it. That it was a moral infringement more than anything else. Because had you taken that picture away, removed the image from that poster, it would have been a non-issue. So we need to understand our responses. In conclusion, the purpose of tolerance is the conservation and cultivation of difference. We need tolerance to ensure that difference is protected and preserved, because difference is necessary to a vibrant democracy. It's what makes us who we are. We are diverse and we have to embrace that. So tolerance is about the cultivation of that. It's also about the cultivation, I would go as far as disagreement. We have to allow spaces for disagreement. We have to get away from the idea of perpetually searching for agreement. It doesn't happen, and it should not happen in a teaching classroom. I don't want my students to all agree with me. I haven't taught you to think if that is the case. And that's ultimately what education is in any case. What tolerance is not is the defense of harmful and alienating language. And there's a big difference between the two. So it's the conservation of difference and disagreement, but it is not the defense of harmful language and action. And that's my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much.